When I graduated high school in 2008, I was kind of at loss with what to do with my life. I got a job at the local convenience store working the night shift, and for the first 8 months, I really enjoyed it. My parents and friends would always be concerned about me getting robbed or murdered, and rightfully so, but I never had an issue with anyone. About a year in, I finally experienced an encounter that made me change my life. It was a pleasantly cool late September evening, and about 2:30 in the morning. The door opens and a skinny, frail figure of a woman comes in. I'll never be able to forget her. If it wasn't for the way she was acting, she honestly would have been kinda cute. She had a collarbone waterfall of brown hair, tan skin, and attractive figure, and was wearing a tight-fitting dark gray tank top. I say that she was in her late 20s or early 30s, but it was her eyes that really captivated me, and not in a good way. This woman had this blank and distant stare. It was like she was an expressionless shell, moving purely on robotic instincts. She didn't say hi, howdy, what's up, doc, or anything even after I greeted her from just 4 feet away. Honestly, I just assumed that she was high or something. She moved past the front counter towards the little household supply aisle we had. She picked up a little bag of cat food and turned back towards me, staring me straight in the eye so intently that I thought she was going to pull out a gun and shoot me. What she did was honestly not much worse though. She got to the front counter, never breaking her silence or gaze, even after I tried talking to her. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a $5 bill and like 3 quarters. With tax, it was still a little short of the price, but I'd take $1 out of my wallet and stick it in the cash register later. She was starting to creep me out. After I took the money and rang her up, she didn't move, just stood there staring at me without even blinking. I tried speaking to her again, but this time she brought the cat food up and opened it with the littlest ease I've ever seen a package of pet food get opened. By this time, I was just standing in silence trying to figure out what the heck she was doing. Her gaze is unflinching, and she reached into her bag and pulled out a big handful of cat food, staring at me as blank and emotionless as the very second she entered the store. She shoved the whole handful of pet food in her mouth and started crunching away, bits and pieces of the cat food dropping from her lips onto the floor. I wanted to say something, but I was too flabbergasted to even get the voice out of my throat. Finally, after a couple minutes of chewing on her food, the woman just turned around and walked out of the store holding the bag of pet food. My boss pulled up the camera footage of the incident the following morning before I clocked out. He said that he had seen that woman before, but only once in his 5 years of employment there. He told me, and I kind of think it was a lie, that she was a crazy woman who lived in the old mausoleum in the city cemetery. He said the cops knew about her, and as part of their initial nightly patrols would go and check to make sure that she wasn't dead. That night was a night that made me decide to go to trade school. I never want to work at a gas station again. Every so often, she still appears in my nightmares, just standing there, staring at me with his deep, blank eyes, crunching a handful of cat food. Nope, never want to meet her again. So, when I was 17, I just got in my first car. One day, I drove my brother and myself to the dentist. While we were waiting in the lobby, I noticed someone had parked really badly next to my car. Since it was new, I was pretty paranoid about it getting scratched or something. My brother went in for his appointment, and I decided to move my car to a safer spot. After I parked in my new spot, I was walking back to the office. Just before I could cross the parking lot to get inside, a minivan with super tinted windows, like so tinted that there was this weird blue hue, pulled up close to me and almost hit me. I thought it was strange, but just walked around it. As I was heading to the door, I caught my reflection in the glass and noticed that the guy was getting out of the van and starting to follow me. At first, I didn't think much of it, and I just started walking faster, but then he started running after me. That's when I realized Okay, this is actually happening. And I started running too. I barely made it to the door before he could grab me. The door was glass, and I could see his reflection. He was reaching out, like inches away from me. He looked like a totally regular guy, wearing a button up shirt and khakis, which made the whole thing even more surreal. I ran inside and he didn't follow, probably because he didn't want to be seen. I was completely shocked and kind of in denial of what just happened because it all went down so fast. I looked out the window and saw him holding a purple cloth in his hand. No idea what that was about. He looked around, then got back in the minivan and sped off. I told the receptionist, but I was still pretty shaken up and confused. The whole thing happened in less than a minute. I've wondered what would have happened to me if I hadn't run. So this took place about 4 years ago, but I still think about it and wonder. I googled the name of the farm to see if my bad vibes were accurate. It started with me going upstate to go horseback riding and chilling. Our kids were with their grandparents, and my husband had a fishing trip, so I decided to rent a car and indulge in my favorite hobby, horses. I had not been away on a solo trip for years and was looking forward to it. I found an Airbnb glamping place that had excellent reviews, nice tents, and horses on the farm. People raved about the married couple who ran it. I booked it and drove up there. The weirdness started as soon as I showed up. There was just something wrong. The wife wasn't around and the husband seemed out of it. I got into my tent and slept, since I was late. Slept fine, but a bit uncomfortable. There didn't seem to be many people around. When I came in for breakfast to the main house, the husband, mid-60s, and the exchange student worker, mid-20s, were making breakfast for a handful of guests. I was late again and ended up alone with just the two of them. Over the following hour, he explained to me how his wife had left him and how he was now a shattered man, and that he had been forced to take up a relationship with an exchange student worker. He told me this when she was not in the room, as she was a bit shy about it, but then he proceeded touching her in a very inappropriate way. I was too awkward back then to walk away. Since then, I have learned to listen to my gut and not be so polite, but back then I just stayed and just listened because I felt like I couldn't leave. Long story short, he gave me many inappropriate details that I did not want to hear about his marriage imploding and his new relationship. After that, he offered me a room in the main house instead. I turned it down and went back to my tent. I was desperately thinking about how to get out of there. I had paid for 3 nights, but there was just something very wrong. I sat down on the air mattress and started going through my phone to see what my options were. As I was sitting there scrolling, I hear him come to the side of the tent. There's nothing else near it and nobody else. He just stands there, breathing. I could see his shadow through the tent. He's just standing there, not moving. I just froze up, couldn't think or say anything. I just went still. He stands there for what felt like an eternity, but it might have just been a few minutes. Then he left, and I threw everything I had into my car and just took off. I think I called and said that I cut my trip short when I was already far away. I have never been back, and I have never seen anyone else say anything strange about this place online. I can't find them on Airbnb, but the farm still seems operational as a B&B. I don't know if I was overreacting or not, but I still think about the panicked feeling I had in the tent and knew I couldn't have stayed. Hello everyone. A series of events unfolded in my life, causing me to move out and live out of my car since a month ago. It's nothing new to me, however, as I lived out of my car for 5 years prior in the past, and had never had any encounters, until yesterday that is. Something happened which shook me up. There's a small beach on the coastline, which has been my go-to spot, On the southbound part of the road is a whole lineup of cars and RVs, mainly other homeless people, but also people coming to hang out because it offers nice views of the bay. I usually sleep on this side. The people who come out here like to bring beers, play their music, and gather outside, but it's super chill and everyone keeps to themselves. Lately, I've been having trouble sleeping and tend to knock out around 2 a.m. ish, not waking up until noon. Problem is, on the south side, the sun will bear down at 8 a.m., turning the car into a sauna in the morning. About 100 yards down on the north side, there's this tiny hiking area in a vast lot just off the road, and there's a few trees there which offer me shade well into the afternoon. There's also a park right across the street. It's a much more secluded area, but I've been sleeping there since the last week or so. No issues at all. Typically, only a couple other cars park around this area. Yesterday, I pulled into this spot around 12 a.m. and found this large 4x4 pickup truck parked there. There's another car parked across the road and a third one on the other end of the lot as well. I think, no biggie. There's a second tree just in front of the pickup which will work, so I'll pull up there. But it's only a 20-foot distance between us and I'm in their direct line of vision. I realize now in hindsight it was a stupid move, but oh well. There's two people in their front seat playing their mariachi music, and there's also a dog outside on a leash. Probably others in the back seat, but I couldn't confirm due to the windows being tinted. I never made eye contact and kept my head down the entire time. I first go take a leak in the forest, come back and grab my blanket and pillow from the truck, and hop into the back seat. I'd assume that would throw off any paranoia they may be having, as they now see that I'm just coming to sleep for the night. Within 5 minutes, they take off and drive up the road for a short distance before suddenly making a U-turn and returning back into the lot. They do some weird random driving in front of me, then pulls back up slowly very close to my side. I roll down my window. The passenger has his window all the way down. He's asking me something in Spanish. He is clearly drunk, coked up, bloodshot eyes, pupils dilated, and talking in a slight slur. He's also visibly angry, expressing intimidation via body language. I respond to him in English, so he asks me if I'm Policia, and I'm like, what the fuck? Nah man, I'm just sleeping here, and I show him my pillow and blanket, but he keeps pressing me. No, please come here. I reply, no man, please don't come here, never, don't worry. Again reiterating that I'm here to sleep, but he's getting frustrated and asks me where I'm coming from. I try my best to de-escalate the situation and talk calmly and nicely, and even apologize if I happen to be bothering them. I directly ask them, do you think I'm the police? And he responds in the negative, shaking his head. I point up to the tree and explain, shade par morning, shade par in my car. Just so he knows why I decided to park in this spot, but he's pretending to not understand me and says, Policia, come here. And I tell him again, nah man, please don't come here. I sleep here every night, it's okay. Dude is pissed though and starts halfway flashing something in his hand from behind the car door. It was a very subtle gesture. I cannot say for sure that it was a gun, but he was definitely suggesting something. He then says, after today, no more sleeping here. And he repeated it 2 more times, then goes, okay, whilst pumping his chest and piercing his gaze in a menacing fashion. The driver floors the gas pedal, taking off in a frenzy. As they're taking off, the passenger dude hangs out the window looking back at me, mean-mugging the living shit out of me before they get back on the road, hitting the accelerator at high speeds. I sat there for a good 10 minutes, just so I don't run into them the second time, then went to go sleep near a Walmart instead. I didn't get their license plate, but since they likely all see my plate and know what I look like, it'd probably turn sour for me if I reported them anyway. I spent the whole day dwelling on what happened yesterday, and have little clue as to what made them trip out like this. My only plausible theory is they didn't like me parking so close to them and took it as disrespect. Anywho, there goes my perfect parking spot. This happened a few hours ago. I'm a 22-year-old female. I was walking back home from work, and this random guy, who looked to be in his 30s, was on his scooter and kept honking behind my back. The road was pretty empty, so I was wondering what the deal was with the honk. I didn't turn back to look at him though. I just kept walking. As he passed by me, he slowed down and looked at me. He stopped honking and kept his vehicle moving. So I thought he mistook me for someone else and realized I wasn't who he was looking for or something. Suddenly, this guy raised his left arm and gestured as if he was squeezing in the air like he wants to grab me, while his vehicle was still moving. He looks in the rearview mirror and sees my reaction while doing it. I was expressionless because my brain was slowly registering what was happening. He honked again and did the same gesture, looking in his side mirror one more time before taking a left turn and disappearing. He wanted to make sure I saw it, and that's why he honked and slowed down. What a creep. Trigger warning: pedophilia. While our parents were out of town, my two younger siblings and I stayed a weekend at our grandma's house. My grandma's long-term boyfriend, let's call him Banks, had moved in with her and would be staying the weekend with us as well. The moment I met him, he immediately gave me the creeps. I don't remember much of our first night there, so I assumed that nothing out of the ordinary happened. That quickly changed the following morning. My grandma announced that she would be leaving us at home with Banks for a bit so that she could pick up groceries. As my grandma left, my brother, sister, and I sat on the living room couch watching TV. Shortly thereafter, I heard Banks emerge from his bedroom down the hall. I listened closely to Banks' footsteps as he approached and noticed that he was more so slowly creeping down the hallway as opposed to walking. I fixated on the doorway where he would appear, and when he did, he was crouched down, eyes wide and grinning with his hands positioned as if he was about to pounce towards us. He began running towards us on the couch yelling, "I'm the tickle monster," then pounced on my younger sister, aggressively tickling her while kneeling her over the couch. Banks is over 6 feet tall, muscular build. My sister is below the age of 10. My sister repeatedly asked Banks to stop, exclaiming, "I don't like it. Stop that." My sister let out a high-pitched scream and began to hysterically cry. At this point, I intervened. It sounded like Banks was hurting her, and I didn't like that he was continuing to tickle her while she screamed and cried. I tried inserting myself between my sister and Banks and told him to stop. He wouldn't remove his hands from my sister. I began slapping Banks' arm and telling him, "Let go of her," and once he released his grip, I screamed, "Run!" to my brother and sister. The only thing I remember feeling and thinking in the moment was, "Get the fuck away from this man right now." I ran out of the living room, down the hallway, and into the first bedroom. My sister followed behind me, then my brother, and as I was closing the bedroom door, Banks caught up to us and shoved himself against the door to prevent me from locking it shut. Miraculously, I was able to lock it before he overpowered me. Once my siblings and I were locked in the bedroom, Banks continued to bang on the door while repeatedly yelled, "I'm the tickle monster. Let me in. The tickle monster is coming to get you." Both my siblings are hysterically crying at this point. I am now overcome with fear of what Banks will do if he manages to gain access to the bedroom. Although I didn't have a phone, I yelled back at him, "If you don't stop, I'm gonna call the police." Banks backed off and I heard him retreat back into his bedroom down the hall and close the door. My siblings and I stayed in the bedroom with the door locked until my grandma returned. Banks remained in his bedroom for the rest of the night. The following morning, Banks left the house and my grandma said he'll be gone for the day working. That afternoon, my grandma fell asleep on the living room couch, and for whatever reason, I decided to go into the bedroom and snoop around. I went into what appeared to be Banks' nightstand and found his personal journal. For the most part, it was filled with nonsense and very detailed, drawn descriptions of sex. Some of the drawings had a bit of a satanic undertone, but at the time I was too young to recognize and understand what I was looking at. I began quickly flipping through it and landed on a page with big, bold black and red capital letters. It read, "If you die a virgin, do you go to hell?" Below it was a drawing of a nude girl. There were two versions of the girl standing side by side. One where she was happy and smiley, and the other face was more distorted and confused. Typing this out and revisiting it makes me feel disgusting. I don't know how to emphasize how disturbing this was. I instantly went numb and dropped the journal, ran into the living room, and demanded my grandma call my parents so I could go home immediately. My sister was ultimately covered in bruises from Banks tickling her. Strange, creepy dude. Last night, I decided I was going to meet up with some friends at a really chill brewery with live music. I'm a pretty big homebody, so me going out is pretty rare, but nonetheless, I went. Since I would be drinking, I decided to just Uber to the brewery, which is important to the story in a bit. My friend brought along a guy that we didn't know, but we were a pretty open and accepting group. The guy decided he wanted to talk to me most of the night, which is fine, but I just started having a bad feeling about him. I usually trust my gut, and I was right about this guy. He kept trying to get me away from the group and to be alone with him, and I was consistent that I was not interested in spending any time alone with him, and that I wasn't interested. My friends even told the guy to knock it off. At the end of the night, around 11 p.m., I called an Uber to go home, and this guy appeared out of nowhere as I stood outside the brewery. I was in a well-lit area and a lot of people out and about, so I wasn't by any means alone. He kept trying to get me to walk him to his car, and I said no, my Uber is almost here. He kept pestering me to let him take me home, and I told him numerous times that I really liked for him to leave me alone. Luckily, my Uber got there quickly and whisked me away, but even my Uber driver had a bad feeling about him. To the creepy man who thought it would be okay to try to get me alone constantly and would not take no for an answer, let's never meet again.